Johnson III here with our morning meditation. What a wonderful joy it is every time we have a chance to talk and share along this journey. It is our hope that you will be encouraged from these messages and that they might guide you as you go through the course of your week, the course of the month, and the course of your life. Well, today's morning meditation is entitled, We Need to Be Inspired. We need to be inspired. I want to start off by sharing what I believe is obvious to me, but maybe not to others. That we are struggling, many of us are struggling with an inspiration vacuum. It seems like life has somehow, with all that we have witnessed and all that we've engaged in, has exhausted us. Many of us had hopes and dreams and ideals that we would pursue in life. We grew up with these kind of concepts that if you work hard, if you do all that you can, that you might find yourself in the place of achieving all that you could ever imagine. And I still believe that is true. But I think the challenge that many people have is that they no longer feel inspired. Often what happens to us is that in the lack of or the absence of inspiration, we find ourselves being motivated by other things, like motivated by fear or anger or things like shame. And only problem with that, or one of the major problems with having those things as our principal motivators, is that fear sometimes really is not a real thing. And so when we're motivated by fear, we will now act and do things out of fear that may lead us to make choices and decisions that we will eventually regret. Anger being a motivator really is a response to fear, that when I am afraid that the things that I want or the things that I need or the things that I desire will not come to pass, then I am enraged by what happens or what does not happen. Even if what I want is justice, even if what I want is opportunity, even if I want is a chance to be able to grow, if it looks like I won't be able to do that, if I don't see myself in the landscape or those around me on the landscape or on the radar of my future of that happening, then it breeds a sort of resentment and anger. Maybe perhaps a motivator that we often lean on is shame. And that is the way people try to motivate us. You should be ashamed of yourself for not doing these things. You should do better. You should try harder. And all that does is start to close in the walls of our lives, overshadowing us like a storm or clouds or a dark night that keeps us from being able to see the real potential in what we're doing. Why would shame be a motivator? It is one of those things that kind of pushes us to the place where our peers can now extract from us behaviors that they would like to see. And sometimes that's not a bad thing, but it cannot be our chief motivator. The chief motivator has to be inspiration. And when we're inspired, when we find ourselves finding something that we weren't angry about, or we weren't afraid of, or we weren't finding ourselves being shameful about, but something that gets us in the heart, that makes us want to do better because we feel inspired to do it, it's a different ballgame. You know, you can't really convince someone to love you unless they are inspired to love you. You can't really get someone to be able to kind of share and achieve things unless they feel inspired. So I would like to put on the record for our sharing, and as we begin moving from one month to the next, to let the motivator for our lives, that which inspires us, be love. We are in a vacuum of inspiration. In other words, we don't love enough. It's nothing like being in a place where you're motivated just for the principle of it from being inspired. You know, there are things that sometimes you have to slow down, peel away all the other expectations, ideas, thoughts, fears, anger, shame, and everything else that might bring us to that place, and then allow ourselves to be inspired. What I've learned in life is that God always brings about a certain inspiration. We need inspiration. And when we're desperate for inspiration, it feels like we're in a desert place. It feels like we're in an arid place where the air is dry and there's not much hope and we don't see any water involved. And we sit and cry and wonder when the change is going to come. And right at that moment, God sends an oasis right in the middle of our desert. Well, there is a biblical story, one of Abraham. It's a complicated story, and I won't get too far into it. But he found himself with a wife, Sarah or Sarai, his wife, who wanted to have children, then offers him her servant girl. Other contexts, won't get into all of the patriarchy there and all those conversations. But here is the challenge. Hagar, an Egyptian young woman, then has a child by Abraham. And in that moment, in the biblical story, that somehow Hagar is run away from home. There with her child, there abandoned and put out away from Abraham, away from what she had known, away from her home, and with a child living in a desert place. And she hears the child crying and she weeps herself, waiting to die. And in that moment, while feeling mistreated and an injustice has been done to her and to her child, it is there through her tears that God shows up in the form of an angel and says to her, don't cry anymore. I've heard the child's cry and I've heard your cry. And while you were about to give up, just a few yards from here is an oasis filled with water, a well waiting to nourish you and take care of what you need. That's the way inspiration is. It is one of those things that just when we're at the moment of about to give up, throw up our hands, throw in the towels, come to the conclusion if you can't beat them, then you should join them. Get in the pity party, go through the process of being frustrated and angry, and why not just let it all burn and let it go away? Why not let the family disintegrate? Why not let our communities disintegrate? Why not let our schools disintegrate? Why not let our nation disintegrate? Why not let our own lives fall apart? And in that moment, it is the moment in which we are in desperate need of inspiration. And if you look close enough, look long enough, you'll see your creator, you'll see God, you'll see the one who made you now standing saying, don't give up just yet. I have the answer to your problem, and I've always had it there placed in right in the path strategically for your good. Some of the things that we find ourselves in, some of the frustrations we find ourselves in, some of the things that are difficult we find ourselves in may not be revealed until we come to the place in which we are ready now to look for God for the inspiration. And always, like faithfully as God would do it, God, before we had got to that place, before we were frustrated, before we were angry, before we were resentful, before we felt the shame, before we were motivated by all these things like fear, God placed a solution in the middle of that moment on the road in our lives so that we would be refreshed by an oasis in our desert. I want to encourage you. I want to inspire you. I want you to feel what I feel when I hear these things along the way. As a young man, I remembered hearing, I love hip hop and hip hop music. And I remember hearing Nasir, make a record entitled I Can. And the lyrics go like this, the chorus goes like this: I know I can be what I want to be. If you work hard at it, you'll be where you want to be. It was a song, a message to young people, young African American children, to be inspired again. Don't give up on yourselves. Don't give up on what you see around you. Don't give up on your family. Don't give up on your community. Work hard at what it is before you. You can be what you want to be, even though the odds seem to be against you. Our nation is desperately in need of such inspiration. Even when you thought that if you did it right, played the game right, did what folks said right, abided by the rules, and you discovered that the nation and circumstances seem to not shake and shape themselves according to the ideals that were presented, it's still okay and it's still important to live by the principles that you learn because they are universal principles. Like the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Not as they have done to you, but as you would something that turns. And if it doesn't turn things around us on the outside, it certainly fits us for the journey on the inside. So I want you to be inspired. That's the point of this message. We need inspiration, and inspiration can get us through a many of dark night, a many of dangerous valley, and a many of difficult situations, even in desert situations. God can and will turn deserts into rivers of water. God can and will turn things that look like they cannot possibly turn out positive and make them work for your good. These moments in our lives, we cannot go through life without being inspired. I feel inspired now, encouraged, because I've learned that the more difficult the moment, the more opportunity there is for things to turn around. And I want to encourage you to walk that path and be inspired. Well, that's the morning meditation. I want you to know that you're loved, you're appreciated, and you're irreplaceable. We hope this message encourages you and inspires you. Because as you get up and start your day, start the week, go through the month, you will run into difficulties. But don't worry, you are ready for it. The inspiration that you need is right before you. All you have to do is grab it, and you'll discover that you'll be able to navigate through the most difficult moments just because you've been inspired. And there's no better inspirational gift than the one who created you and told you at the end of this rainbow, I have exactly what you need. But you got to go through the storm to get to it. I can handle the storm as long as I know that it won't last always. Be inspired. Have a great day.